Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome back to the Brownstone. My name is Rich Brown. Thank you for tuning in once again. I'm glad you're here. Hope you had a great week. And today, I want to go back to something that we started a couple of weeks ago with the Triad inversions, because I wanted to get into the idea of using these inversions over chord changes, and specifically over the 2-5-1 chord progression. These can come in super handy over specific chord changes. And we could really get into examining the different ways to approach a chord progression. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at 2-5-1, the ever popular 2-5-1 chord progression. And I'm going to play these in the key of C. So for those of you who don't know, we're dealing with chords based on the degree of the scale. So we have the 2 chord, which is going to be D minor in the case of C major. D minor is the 2 chord. We have a C dominant 7th. Here I'm just playing like a major triad, but I'll show you why in a little bit. We have G7 for our 5 chord, and then we have C major 7 as our 1 chord. So that's the sound of our progression. 2, 5, 1. You've heard it a million times in a million songs. So today we're going to talk about the different ways that we can approach this chord progression using the triads and the inversions and those chords that we talked about in the previous video. If you haven't seen that video, I will put a link right there, and please check that out, because it'll give you a sense of all the shapes and sounds and patterns that we'll be getting into in this lesson. So let's take it to the base. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is the actual chords. So I'm dealing, I always forget that, I did it again. Turn up I'll take more volume. So we're dealing with, again, D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7, our 1 chord. Okay, so I always get excited about these things because looking at them from different perspectives can be kind of exciting, and it can open up the fingerboard in new ways that you might not have thought about previously. And I love that. I love being able to make the light bulbs go off for my students and for y'all, my friends and neighbors. So here's how we do that. When I look at that 2 chord, that D minor, I have that D minor triad. But I can look at it from a different perspective as well. Because if I look at the triad and the inversions, well, there are a couple of things that I can take note of. First being, the first thing that I notice is that second inversion starts on the 5th of the scale, which means if it starts on the 5th, and I'm playing a chord where the root of that chord is on the A string, then I can go down and approach that second inversion of the triad from the same fret a string above, which means if this is my chord and this is my root position triad, then I can jump straight to my second inversion shape. If you remember from that video that we talked about before, the second inversion has this shape, that beautiful chord that we talked about before. So that means this is a triad, and this is a triad. This is the second inversion of the minor triad. Now, this is useful because it gives us another option as far as how to approach that 2 chord. Because then I can either play, or I can play either one of those shapes is going to work. Now, there is some debate as to whether or not the 5th is the optimal note to play on the downbeat. But I don't know. To me, that's subjective, and some people like it and some people don't. It's up to you. I'm just giving you the options. Do with them what you wish. But check this out. If I have this now, this chord is my 2 chord. Sounds good to me. Then I can go back to the root position of my 5 chord, right? Which is just going to be a root position triad on the 5 chord, which is a dominant 7th, which is a major chord. So we're only dealing with the majors and the minors. We don't have to get into the 7ths just yet. So I have the 2 chord, the 5 chord, and now, just as I was saying before, if I can approach the second inversion on the same fret, a string below, then I can do the same thing for the 1 chord on the C major. In other words, I have this C major where the root note is on the A string. Here's my C major 1 chord. So that's the root position of the triad. We have to realize and remember that we can start the second inversion of the triad on the 5th, which in this case is G, and I can take that G down the octave and that gives me the second inversion. Now, when I take the shape of that chord, that second inversion of the major, I get this sound. Because remember, we have the 5th, the root, and the 3rd, and we take the root here, the middle note, up to the higher octave. So that means, this is very cool, that means we can play our 2-5-1 chord progression in a couple of ways. This sort of conventional way, but then we also have this. So what do I have there? I'm starting with the second inversion of the D minor. That's that chord. And then the dominant 7th, that 5 chord, is a major chord, so I can just play the root position of G major. And then for that final chord, the 1 chord, I can play the second inversion of C major. So this is cool because now it gives us a different perspective on how to approach the chord progression. Now, I realize fully, as bass players, we're not going to be playing chords, and even if we are, we probably won't be playing them in this sort of low register of the instrument. But these shapes give you a sense of where the notes are going to be for the corresponding triad or inversion. So when I look at these shapes, then I can just play those triads accordingly. So if I was playing like a walking bass line or something like that, then I would use those shapes to construct my bass line. So 2 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. I'll do it again. 2 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord, so that's what those shapes reveal to me. 2 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord, right? So that gives me another way to look at the chord progression, right? Using the triads and the inversions in a different way. But that's just the beginning. So this is where things can get super cool. I know I say that a lot, but trust me, every time I say that, things get super cool. Right? So here's what I do now. The thing that I say a lot in many of my videos is, you should be able to approach your harmony and open up the neck to approach your harmony from different places. And as I was saying in that previous video, when I play the root position of a triad, the first inversion of a triad, the second inversion of a triad, every time I do that, it puts me in a new position. So theoretically, I should be able to approach a 2-5-1 chord progression from each of these positions. This is where things get super exciting, because now I can mix and match my triads and inversions to come up with the most comfortable way to play a 2-5-1 chord progression or any progression in different positions. So if you remember what we did in the first sort of approach, we had our 2 chord using the second inversion of the D minor. We had our root position of the G major, the G7, our 5 chord, basically, because it was convenient, it was right there. But you know what else is right here? The second inversion of the 1 chord. You can play the first inversion too, that's totally cool. But this might be something that you haven't looked at before, haven't examined before. So I'm giving you different perspectives. Second inversion, root position, second inversion. Kind of hip, right? Now, let's move on down to this area of the neck. We can do the same thing, starting with that second inversion of the D minor. Because already the little finger here is working into the area that we want to head into. So we can still use that as our 2 chord, or we can just go back to the root. But again, I'm giving you some different options, different ways to approach these progressions. So if we keep this as our 2 chord, now check this out. Normally I would go to the root position of that 5 chord, but check it out. The first inversion of that 5 chord is going to be right there, right? If you remember from that previous video, I've got the 3rd, the root, and the 5th. I'm still playing the triad. This is the first inversion of the major triad. So there's my 2 chord. Now here, oh, beautiful. That's another option for my 5 chord. And then for the 1 chord, look at this. My 3rd of G is a B, and I'm moving to C for that 1 chord. So I'm a semitone away from the root position of my 1 chord. How cool is that? So now I've got second inversion of the 2 chord, first inversion of the 5 chord, root position of my 1 chord. Play it right, Brown, play it right. So again, let's not look at the chords. Let's outline those triads and inversions. So here we've got our 2 chord as we played before. sounds so super hip. So again, I've got second inversion of my 2 chord, first inversion of my 5 chord, root position of my 1 chord. Amazing, right? Super hip. So I hope that's all making sense so far. I love this stuff because it really, I'm all about opening up the neck and finding different ways to play the same idea so that I can move around a little bit and have some leeway, especially when it comes time for me to like solo over something. I've got options. I've got many options. I can break out of just playing in one position and start to move around, but then I have different ways that I can approach the entire progression using this method. So here's the thing that we have to realize. In the same way that we learned that this is the sound of a 2-5-1 chord progression, we can also get into our minds and our hands the fact that this is a 2-5-1 chord progression. And then this is a 2-5-1 chord progression. So now let's move down to the 2 chord, our D minor. We'll put this in root position starting on the E string, which gives us the root, the 5th, and the 3rd up top. So now I'm at the 10th fret of the E string. Here's my 2 chord, D minor. Root position of that D minor starting from the E string. When I go to the 5 chord, there's the root position of a G major triad for that 5 chord. So I've got G, B, and D. D being the 5th. Now remember that rule. We can access the second inversion of the triad, major or minor, by playing that 5th below the root, which is going to be on the same fret, right? So if this is my G major triad, my shape for that chord representing the second inversion of that triad is going to be there. So now I have root position of the 2 chord. I can already hear where this is going and I love it already. This is the root position of the 2 chord. Here is the second inversion of the 5 chord. Sounds like this. Beautiful. Now check it out. I can go down to the root position of the 1 chord, but the second inversion of that 1 chord is going to sound great, and it's right there at the 12th fret. And it sounds beautiful. So then I can think of this other way of playing a 2-5-1 chord progression, where I have the root position of the 2 chord, the second inversion of the 5 chord, and the first inversion of the 1 chord. Beautiful sounds. And then again, for you purists out there, if you don't want to play chords, you don't have to. The beauty of this is you can outline these triads and inversions and get some beautiful bass lines happening. So here's the root position of D minor to second inversion of the 5 chord, second inversion of the 1 chord, down to the root. I'll play that again because it's a beautiful melody. How about that? So I hope that all makes sense. I'm going to leave it there for now. My friends, And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, leave them in the comments section. I realize that some of this might be a little more advanced, but it's also very exciting. It's giving you new ways to look at things. And then when you have these new perspectives, these new ways to approach very conventional ideas, you start to see all of these things. You start to get every one of these ideas into the muscle memory the more you practice them. And then it just opens up a whole new world. You know, the most amazing thing about this is we're only playing triads. I haven't added anything to the harmony at all. We haven't dealt with adding the sevenths or playing any extensions or anything beyond the 3 notes of a triad for all of these different ways to play over a 2-5-1 chord progression, which is super exciting because it means we've only scratched the surface, barely, of where we can go with these ideas. So I hope this all makes sense. As I said before, if you like this video, please click like, share it with all of your friends and neighbors, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell whenever you want to know when the next video is going to be released. You can donate to the channel if you want to. Any donation is greatly appreciated, no matter how small or how large. And it really helps me out in bringing you more content like this. I have a ton of these ideas that I want to share with all of you because I really want to be able to help this community and help you all as individuals to find your own musical voices. That's the goal. So I'm going to leave it there, my friends and neighbors. I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Rich Brown. Thank you so much for visiting me in the brownstone. Peace and love, y'all. We'll see you in the next video.